The first warning didn't come from a public announcement or a royal statement. It came from a tense exchange behind palace doors, where a locked jewelry vault and a decades-old trust suddenly became the center of a crisis. Within hours, whispers spread through royal corridors that King Charles had made a decision Queen Camilla never expected. A decision tied to some of the monarchy's most treasured jewels. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the rumors seemed too extraordinary to believe. Palace staff were accustomed to secrets, discreet conversations, and carefully managed narratives. Yet this felt different. Something had shifted behind the scenes, and even those who spent their lives navigating royal protocol sensed that an invisible line had been crossed. The whispers began after several trusted officials were reportedly called into a series of private meetings involving King Charles, senior legal advisors, and a handful of royal administrators whose responsibilities rarely attracted public attention. Their sudden involvement immediately raised questions. Why would experts in trusts, inheritance arrangements, and royal property management be gathering so urgently? More importantly, why was the Queen Mother's private jewelry collection suddenly at the center of those discussions? As speculation spread, unusual activity was reportedly noticed around areas connected to the collection. Staff members who normally had routine access found procedures changing without explanation. Conversation stopped abruptly when certain names were mentioned. Long-serving aides, usually willing to offer subtle hints about palace developments, became unusually guarded. Silence itself became the story. The deeper people looked, the more obvious it became that a matter of enormous significance was unfolding behind closed doors. For years, many believed the jewels remained safely under arrangements that no one would challenge. They represented prestige, history, and continuity. Yet insiders began quietly suggesting that questions had emerged regarding whether possession truly meant ownership. The distinction seemed small at first, but within royal circles it carried enormous consequences. If the jewels were held in trust rather than personally owned, then entirely different rules could apply. Suddenly, discussions that had once seemed settled were being reopened. Documents were reportedly reviewed. Old records were examined. Long-forgotten provisions were allegedly being studied with renewed urgency. What made the situation even more explosive was the growing belief that Queen Camilla had little reason to expect such scrutiny. Many assumed the matter had been resolved long ago. Yet as the days passed, whispers intensified that a trust document connected to the Queen Mother had resurfaced. No official confirmation arrived. No palace spokesperson offered clarity. Instead, silence continued to deepen, fueling even more speculation. Every unanswered question seemed to create three new ones. What exactly had been discovered? Why was King Charles suddenly involved? And what could possibly be important enough to trigger emergency discussions at the highest levels of the monarchy? The answers, it seemed, were hidden not in the present but in decisions made decades earlier by a royal figure determined to protect her legacy long after she was gone. But to understand why this decision shook the palace, it's necessary to go back decades to the woman who originally protected those jewels. Long before Charles became king, the Queen Mother had already put protections in place for some of the most valuable royal heirlooms in existence. What appeared to be a collection of dazzling jewels was actually something far more significant, a symbol of continuity, duty, and royal succession. The deeper investigators looked into the growing controversy, the more they found themselves pulled back through decades of royal history. The story was no longer simply about a collection of precious gems. It was about foresight, it was about legacy, and above all, it was about a woman who understood better than most that royal institutions survive only when their treasures are protected from the shifting emotions and personal interests of each generation. Long before the current crisis emerged, the Queen Mother reportedly recognized a challenge that future monarchs might one day face. Power changes hands, families evolve, loyalties shift, yet certain symbols must remain untouched if the crown is to preserve its identity. That belief reportedly became the foundation of a private trust connected to some of the most treasured heirlooms associated with the royal family. While many members of the public viewed these jewels as beautiful accessories worn during important occasions, those within royal circles often saw something entirely different. These pieces carried stories stretching across generations. They represented marriages, coronations, victories, sacrifices, and moments of national significance. They were not simply objects. They were reminders of continuity in an institution built upon the passage of responsibility from one generation to the next. This distinction would later become critically important. According to royal observers, there has always been a difference between personal possessions and legacy assets. Personal property belongs to an individual. Legacy assets belong to a story far larger than any one person. The Queen Mother reportedly understood that distinction with remarkable clarity. Sources close to royal historians have long suggested that she viewed certain heirlooms as part of the monarchy's permanent heritage rather than private rewards to be distributed according to personal preference. Whether those interpretations are entirely accurate remains a subject of debate, but they have become central to understanding the controversy unfolding today. As years passed, the trust itself attracted little public attention. It quietly fulfilled its purpose in the background, largely untouched by controversy. Yet beneath that calm surface, an important principle remained intact. The jewels were preserved not only for the present, but for generations yet to come. Their significance extended beyond current royals and future kings. They represented a bridge connecting the past to the future, ensuring that certain symbols of royal continuity would survive changing eras and changing personalities. But as new figures rose within the royal hierarchy, questions slowly began to emerge. Some insides reportedly wondered whether the original intentions behind the trust were being interpreted correctly. Others questioned whether sufficient safeguards remained in place to ensure the collection would continue serving its intended purpose. These concerns remained private for years, surfacing only in occasional whispers among advisors and longtime palace staff. Yet whispers have a way of growing louder when uncertainty enters the picture. Now, with renewed scrutiny focused on the Queen Mother's arrangements, those old concerns were no longer confined to private conversations. They were becoming impossible to ignore. Every document reviewed seemed to raise another question. Every answer appeared to reveal a deeper layer of complexity. And as officials searched for clarity, one reality became increasingly difficult to escape. As questions about the trust intensified, attention increasingly turned toward one person whose connection to the jewels had become impossible to ignore. For years, Camilla appeared secure within the royal hierarchy. Yet behind the ceremonies and public appearances, reports suggest a growing dispute was unfolding over who truly had authority over several pieces connected to the Queen Mother's legacy. As attention increasingly focused on Camilla's connection to the collection, what had once been a quiet discussion among advisors began evolving into something far more sensitive. The issue was no longer confined to legal paperwork or historical records. It was becoming personal, deeply personal. For years, Camilla had occupied a position that many believed gave her considerable influence over matters connected to the royal household. Following Charles's accession to the throne, that perception only grew stronger. To outside observers, her place appeared secure, her role firmly established, and her future within the institution beyond question. Yet behind that appearance of stability, reports suggest uncertainty was quietly taking root. Much of that uncertainty centered on the Queen Mother's treasured collection. According to palace whispers, Camilla's access to pieces associated with the trust gradually became a topic of discussion among those responsible for safeguarding royal heritage. No one publicly challenged her position. No dramatic confrontation emerged. Instead, concerns reportedly developed in private conversations, cautious briefings, and confidential reviews. The very absence of public conflict made the situation more intriguing. If everything was truly settled, why were questions continuing to surface? The answers appeared to lie in the future rather than the present. Sources familiar with royal succession planning reportedly began raising concerns about what would eventually happen to certain heirlooms. Who would become their next custodian? Which branch of the family would oversee their preservation? Most importantly, were the original intentions behind the trust still being honored exactly as intended? These questions carried enormous significance because they touched upon something larger than personal preference. They touched upon continuity itself. As speculation intensified, different factions within palace circles reportedly began forming their own interpretations of the situation. Some believed the existing arrangements were entirely appropriate. Others quietly argued that additional protections might be necessary. What made the debate so delicate was that both sides claimed to be acting in the best interests of the monarchy. Yet beneath those arguments lay competing visions of the future. One perspective focused on present realities. The other focused on preserving a legacy stretching far beyond any current reign. Meanwhile, senior royals were reportedly becoming increasingly aware of the growing tension. No public disagreements emerged, but subtle signs suggested that discussions surrounding the collection were becoming more frequent. Advisors reviewed historical documents. Protocol experts revisited previous arrangements. Long-standing assumptions were examined with fresh scrutiny. Every conversation seemed to lead back to the same uncomfortable question. Were these jewels simply being worn, or were they being safeguarded, according to the wishes of the woman who had protected them for decades? That question carried enormous emotional weight. The Queen Mother's legacy remained deeply respected within royal circles. Any suggestion that her intentions might be misunderstood or overlooked created immediate concern. What had begun as a matter of administration was slowly transforming into a debate about responsibility, stewardship, and trust. The stakes continued rising, and with every passing week, the pressure on those involved became more intense. Then, just as uncertainty seemed destined to continue indefinitely, something reportedly emerged from the archives that changed the entire conversation. What had once been speculation suddenly appeared to acquire a foundation. What had been a debate now threatened to become a decision. And for King Charles, that development would create a dilemma unlike any he had faced before. Then came the discovery that reportedly changed everything, and placed Charles in an impossible position: a forgotten clause. A decades-old trust provision, a document buried within royal archives. Whatever its exact form, insiders claim it reignited a debate that senior officials could no longer ignore, forcing the palace to confront questions it had spent years avoiding. What happened next transformed a quiet concern into a full-scale royal dilemma. For years, uncertainty had lingered beneath the surface, surfacing only in occasional whispers among advisors and historians. Now, according to reports circulating within royal circles, those whispers had finally reached a point where they could no longer be dismissed. The alleged discovery of previously overlooked trust language forced officials to revisit assumptions that many believed had already been settled. Suddenly, a matter once treated as routine administration was being examined with extraordinary seriousness. Legal advisors reportedly became central figures in the unfolding drama. Documents connected to the Queen Mother's arrangements were said to be reviewed with renewed attention, while experts carefully examined historical records that stretched back decades. Every phrase, every provision, and every instruction was reportedly scrutinized. What made the process so sensitive was the growing belief that the issue extended far beyond individual ownership. The question was no longer who possessed the jewels. The question was whether those entrusted with them were fulfilling obligations established long before the current generation ever assumed its place within the monarchy. As the review progressed, attention reportedly focused on instructions believed to be connected to the Queen Mother herself. Although details remained closely guarded, insiders claimed that certain provisions reflected a clear intention to preserve specific heirlooms for future generations rather than allowing them to become subject to changing personal circumstances. Whether those interpretations were entirely accurate remained a matter of debate, but their impact inside the palace was impossible to ignore. Officials who had previously viewed the matter as largely symbolic reportedly began recognizing the potential consequences if those intentions had not been fully honored. For King Charles, the situation was becoming increasingly difficult. Reports suggest he received recommendations from trusted advisors, individuals whose loyalty was directed not toward any particular royal figure, toward the institution itself. Their message was said to be straightforward. If questions existed regarding the trust, they had to be addressed. If uncertainty surrounded the collection's future, clarity had to be established. Delaying action might preserve short-term peace, but it could also create greater problems later. The burden of that reality reportedly weighed heavily on the king. Meanwhile, senior royals were quietly briefed on possible outcomes. Discussions that had once remained confined to specialists were now reaching the highest levels of the family. Some reportedly feared the consequences of intervention. Others believed inaction carried even greater risks. The debate was no longer merely legal. It had become emotional, historical, and deeply personal. Every possible decision seemed capable of creating new tensions. Every path forward appeared to involve sacrifice. The pressure intensified with each passing day. Advisors sought certainty. Historians pointed toward precedent. Protocol experts emphasized responsibility. At the center of it all stood Charles, caught between competing loyalties. On one side stood personal relationships that had defined much of his later life. On the other stood the enduring authority of a royal legacy stretching back generations. The closer officials came to understanding the full significance of the trust provisions, the more unavoidable the decision became. What had begun as an obscure archival review was now evolving into a defining test of leadership. The palace could no longer postpone the issue. Answers were being demanded, expectations were rising, and the moment of decision was approaching faster than anyone anticipated. Once the legal picture became clearer, the king faced a choice that would define both his reign and his relationship with Camilla. The decision, when it finally came, was swift, direct, and reportedly devastating. After weeks of speculation, Charles is said to have authorized a move that fundamentally altered the future of the Queen Mother's treasured collection. For weeks, pressure had been building behind the scenes. Advisors had reviewed documents. Historians had examined precedent. Senior officials had debated responsibility, stewardship, and the meaning of legacy. Yet despite all the discussions, one unavoidable truth remained. Sooner or later, someone would have to make a decision. That responsibility rested with King Charles. Reports suggest he understood from the beginning that whatever choice he made would carry consequences far beyond the immediate controversy. This was no longer simply a question about jewels. It was a question about whether the monarchy would place institutional duty above personal comfort. According to palace insiders, the final recommendation presented to the king was clear. If the trust had been created to protect specific heirlooms for future generations, then those protections needed to be respected. If uncertainty existed regarding custodianship, then clarity had to be restored. Delaying action would only deepen divisions and create greater confusion. The matter had reached a point where inaction itself had become a decision. Faced with that reality, Charles reportedly chose the path he believed best served the institution. The order, insiders claim, was delivered with remarkable precision. Formal instructions were allegedly issued concerning the future oversight of key pieces connected to the Queen Mother's collection. Officials responsible for managing royal assets reportedly moved quickly once those directions were received. Procedures were reviewed, arrangements were updated, responsibilities were clarified. What had once existed within a gray area was now being placed under a structure designed to reflect the original purpose of the trust. For those who had followed the controversy closely, the significance of the move was impossible to ignore. Reports suggest several pieces regarded as central to the trust's legacy were placed back under oversight arrangements intended to safeguard them for future generations. Supporters of the decision viewed it as a reaffirmation of the Queen Mother's wishes. Critics reportedly questioned whether the move was necessary. Yet regardless of opinion, few disputed the fact that a major turning point had been reached. The reaction inside royal circles was immediate. Conversations that had remained private for months suddenly intensified. Advisors exchanged assessments. Palace staff quietly discussed the implications. Longtime observers of the monarchy recognized that something significant had occurred. While no public announcement detailed the full extent of the decision, rumors spread rapidly among those closest to the institution. Many believed Charles had chosen legacy over loyalty. Others viewed the decision as evidence that the monarchy's traditions remained stronger than individual influence. What made the situation even more remarkable was how little the public knew about the drama unfolding behind the scenes. Official schedules continued. Public appearances proceeded as expected. The wider world remained largely unaware of the conflict that had consumed palace discussions for weeks. Yet beneath that calm surface, relationships were changing, expectations were being challenged, and emotions were beginning to collide with obligations in ways that no legal document could fully resolve. The legal uncertainty may have been reduced, but a far more personal struggle was only beginning. Decisions made on paper often carry consequences in the hearts of those affected by them. As the reality of the king's choice settled over the palace, it became increasingly clear that resolving the trust issue had not ended the conflict. In many ways, it had merely transformed it into something far more emotional, far more painful, and far more difficult to control. But while the order may have settled the legal question, it ignited an emotional conflict that could not be contained behind palace walls. Few moments are more painful than realizing a battle has already been decided. According to royal whispers, Camilla found herself confronting exactly that reality as control over the jewels slipped beyond her reach. If the previous weeks had been defined by legal reviews, trust documents, and institutional debates, what followed was far more human. Decisions made inside royal offices do not remain trapped within paperwork. They reach people. They reshape relationships. They force individuals to confront realities they never expected to face. According to palace whispers, that was precisely the situation Camilla now found herself navigating. For years, she had occupied a position of influence within the royal household, gradually earning a place beside Charles through some of the most challenging chapters of his public life. Yet none of that experience could shield her from the emotional weight of what had just occurred. Reports suggest the realization did not arrive all at once. Instead, it unfolded gradually as the implications of the king's decision became clearer. What may have initially seemed like an administrative adjustment increasingly appeared to represent something larger. The return of key pieces to trust oversight was not simply a procedural change. To some observers, it signaled a reaffirmation of priorities: legacy over preference, institution over individual, tradition over expectation. That interpretation alone was enough to spark intense discussion throughout royal circles. Those closest to Camilla reportedly struggled with the outcome as well. Supporters who believed her position had been secure suddenly found themselves facing a different reality. Some quietly questioned whether the decision had been fair. Others reportedly argued that circumstances had left the king with few alternatives. The divide reflected a deeper tension that had existed beneath the surface for years. How should the monarchy balance personal loyalty with historical responsibility? At what point does preserving tradition require difficult sacrifices? No easy answers emerged, and the debate only grew more complicated as emotions intensified. As those conversations continued, reports suggest Camilla experienced an increasing sense of isolation, not because she lacked allies, but because the issue itself seemed larger than any individual relationship. The trust had become a symbol of competing values. Every discussion about the jewels now carried implications far beyond the collection itself. Some saw the decision as a necessary defense of royal heritage. Others viewed it as an unnecessary humiliation. Both perspectives gained supporters, creating an atmosphere where certainty became increasingly difficult to find. Palace staff reportedly felt the strain as well. Many had worked alongside different members of the family for years and found themselves caught between competing loyalties. Some sympathized with the institutional argument. Others sympathized with the personal consequences. Most simply wanted the controversy to end. Yet the deeper the issue penetrated palace life, the harder it became to separate professional responsibility from personal emotion. Every conversation seemed to reveal another layer of complexity. Adding to the pressure was growing concern about public perception. Although the full details remained largely hidden from public view, insiders reportedly worried about how any future revelations might be interpreted. Royal image has always depended on stability, continuity, and confidence. Controversies involving treasured heirlooms, family tensions, and questions of authority threatened to complicate that carefully maintained balance. Even those who supported the king's decision reportedly recognized the potential risks. And yet, beneath all the emotion, one uncomfortable truth continued to emerge. The controversy was never solely about Camilla. It was never solely about Charles. It was never even solely about the jewels. The deeper significance of the conflict lay elsewhere. Every decision being made in the present was shaping the future. Every argument about its stewardship was ultimately an argument about succession. Every question about legacy pointed toward generations still to come. Yet the consequences extended beyond personal disappointment, reaching into the future of the monarchy itself. The controversy surrounding the jewels was never only about the present. It was about the next generation. Every decision being made now would influence how the monarchy passes its most treasured symbols from one era to the next. As emotions continued to ripple through royal circles, a larger reality began to emerge from the controversy. The debate surrounding the Queen Mother's collection had always seemed focused on the present. It appeared to revolve around current relationships, current responsibilities, and current disputes. Yet, beneath the surface, the issue was pointing toward something much bigger. It was pointing toward the future of the monarchy itself. Every discussion about stewardship, every argument about custodianship, and every decision regarding the trust ultimately raised the same question: what kind of institution would future generations inherit? That question naturally brought attention to Prince William. As the future king, William represents more than a single individual preparing for eventual leadership. He represents continuity. He represents the bridge between the monarchy's past and its future. According to royal observers, controversies involving historic assets are often viewed through the lens of succession because they reveal how future leaders may approach the responsibilities they will one day inherit. The decisions being made today will shape expectations tomorrow. They will establish precedents. They will define responsibilities. Most importantly, they will influence how future custodians understand their role within the institution. Alongside William stands Catherine, whose position within the royal family has increasingly become associated with stability, duty, and respect for tradition. Throughout years of public scrutiny and personal challenges, she has often been portrayed as someone who understands the significance of royal heritage beyond its ceremonial value. For supporters of preserving historic assets, that perspective carries enormous importance. The jewels at the center of the controversy are not merely valuable possessions. They are symbols that connect generations separated by decades, sometimes even centuries. Protecting them is not simply an administrative responsibility. It is a commitment to preserving a story that extends far beyond the present moment. That principle has become one of the defining lessons of the entire controversy. Previous generations understood that heritage can be lost far more easily than it can be restored. Once traditions are weakened, rebuilding them becomes increasingly difficult. Once the purpose of an institution becomes unclear, uncertainty begins spreading through every level of that institution. The Queen Mother reportedly recognized of that danger long ago. Whether through formal trusts, carefully crafted arrangements, or deliberate planning, she appears to have understood that certain assets needed protection not for one reign but for many. As discussions continued, insiders reportedly viewed the collection as a test case for broader succession planning. If safeguards could successfully preserve her treasured heirlooms through changing generations, then the monarchy's ability to maintain continuity would be strengthened. Future custodians would inherit not only the objects themselves, but also the principles attached to them: responsibility, stewardship, duty. Those values, many believed, were the true inheritance being passed forward. The deeper significance of the controversy therefore became impossible to ignore. It was never simply about who controlled the jewels today. It was ensuring that future generations would receive them under the same principles that had protected them for decades. The debate was transforming into a lesson about legacy itself. Every difficult decision, every emotional disagreement, and every institutional safeguard pointed toward a single objective: preserving continuity in an era of constant change. And as the immediate tensions slowly began to ease, attention turned toward the man who had been forced to carry the burden of the final decision. Because while others would debate the outcome for years to come, history would ultimately judge the person who made the choice. And as the dust slowly settled, one final question remained: what would this episode ultimately say about Charles himself? In the end, the story was never truly about jewels. It was about something far larger: whether personal relationships could outweigh the obligations of the crown. For Charles, that question may have defined one of the most difficult decisions of his reign. As the controversy slowly faded from the center of palace conversations, a clearer picture began to emerge. The arguments, the uncertainty, the emotional divisions, and the intense scrutiny had all pointed toward a single test. It was not a test of ownership. It was not a test of wealth. It was a test of duty. Throughout his life, Charles had often found himself caught between competing responsibilities. He was a husband, a father, a son, and eventually a king. Each role carried different expectations, different loyalties, and different pressures. But there are moments in every reign when personal considerations collide directly with institutional responsibility. According to royal observers, this appeared to be one of those moments. What made the situation so significant was the symbolism attached to the decision. Had the issue involved an ordinary possession, the outcome might have attracted little attention. Yet these jewels carried the weight of history. They represented generations of royal continuity, stretching back through decades of sacrifice, service, and tradition. Every piece connected the present monarchy to those who came before it. That reality transformed the debate into something much larger than any individual relationship. It became a question about stewardship and whether temporary custodians should ever outweigh permanent legacy. In many ways, the Queen Mother's influence seemed to linger over the entire controversy. Though she was no longer present to defend her intentions, her legacy remained remarkably powerful. The trust she reportedly established continued shaping decisions long after her lifetime had ended. That enduring influence serves as a reminder that some of the most significant figures within royal history continue affecting events years after they are gone. Their decisions become foundations, their values become expectations, their plans become safeguards for future generations. In this case, many believe the Queen Mother's vision ultimately played a central role in determining the outcome. Yet even when a decision appears justified by history and tradition, it does not eliminate the emotional cost. That is what made this episode so compelling. On one side stood personal loyalty, relationships built over years, and the understandable desire to avoid conflict. On the other stood legacy, responsibility, and the preservation of an institution that has survived for centuries, precisely because difficult choices were sometimes made. The contrast between those two forces created the drama at the heart of the story. Success for the institution required sacrifice from individuals. Stability demanded discomfort. Preservation required painful decisions. The outcomes also reinforced a broader lesson about the monarchy itself. Royal traditions are not maintained automatically. They survive because each generation chooses to protect them. Every monarch inherits not only privileges but obligations. Every future king and queen receives responsibilities that extend beyond personal interests. The controversy surrounding the jewels highlighted that reality with remarkable clarity. What seemed like a dispute over valuable heirlooms ultimately became a reaffirmation of the principles that have guided the crown for generations. As attention now turns toward the future, the significance of the decision may continue to be debated. Some will focus on the emotional consequences. Others will focus on the institutional benefits. But perhaps the most important lesson lies somewhere between those perspectives. The monarchy endures not because it avoids difficult choices, but because it confronts them when necessary. And in this case, many believe Charles chose the path he felt best protected the future, even when it came at a personal cost. Because within the House of Windsor, jewels may sparkle for a lifetime, but legacy is what survives for generations. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.